Hi, everybody. It's Barry Rosen here. Sorry for I'm a few minutes late. My computer crashed just as I was booting up. In the event that it does it again, which I hope it won't, I will go to my other computer, in which case just sign off and relog on again. I don't expect that'll happen. It did a blue screen dump, and hopefully, it does that once every 3 or 4 months. So that's good. So I do need to do a sound check. I'm using my headset, and sometimes it'll pick up too much breathing and be a little bit intense. So I'm going to unmute, I guess, some of my students here. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Diana, so how's the
yeah,
sound?
so how's the sound?
Are we
Are
getting
we getting a,
Yeah,
uh,
you have some echo when you
we
talk,
have an echo? Okay,
but now it's fine. Now it's fine.
it's fine. Is there heavy breathing? Because
No,
no, there's no heavy breathing, so you're not hearing
no,
the breathing sound. Okay,
no.
great. Okay, so great. So I'm going to keep you all muted for now. And I usually um, so anyway, welcome to the my first class on spiritual astrology. In my first classes are what I call the ocean in a drop. So I will kind of do a little bit of some of all the lessons in my new spiritual astrology course, which starts in August. But I will spend at least an hour talking in detail about the Atmakarka. Many of you may have seen my lesson on Atmakarka, which is the planet that governs this incarnation and its special lessons. So we'll have a deep knowledge session about Atmakarka today, and at the same time we'll also get an overview of some of the other material that we're going to cover. So my name is Barry Rosen. This is my contact information. For those of you who don't know me, I've been involved in Vedic astrology since 1987. I've been teaching classes online for about 5 years since I got acquainted with GoToWebinar. I used to teach classes privately on location. And I've been involved in all aspects of astrology. My website, Applied Vedic Astrology, most of you know. I have other course offerings there. Most of you know me from Facebook. I have daily blogs at Astro Yoga, Spiritual Astrology, and Vedic Astrology Classes by Barry Rosen. I have a question here. Let's see. Okay. In terms of the format, I don't have anybody to monitor questions. I will pause 2 or 3 times during the talk to take questions, but you can type them in the GoToMeeting tab under questions, and I will look at them during breaks, and I will also unmute you at a certain point so that you can ask questions. I usually start. Vedic astrology is very sacred, and it was originally, what Vedic pundits taught, and it's very connected to the Vedic tradition in that way. So I usually start with some traditional Vedic chanting, and then we'll continue with that. Okay. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha. Vakritunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samabraha Nirvigyam Kurame Deva Sarvakareshi Sarvada Jnanamulam Guru Murti Pujamulam Guru Padam Mantramulam Guru Vakyam Mokshamulam Guru Kripa Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvina Vatitamastu Madhvivishai Vahai Om Shanti 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 Om Aditaye Samaye Mangalai Buddhaye Cha Guru Shukra Shani Bischa Rahave Ketave Namaha. Dedicating it to Lord Krishna, Goddess Saraswati, Goddess of Wisdom, Vedavyasa, writer and cognizer of the Vedas, and my spiritual holy tradition going back to Brahmananda Saraswati, who was a great saint who passed in 1953. And I stand on the shoulders of many great Jyotish teachers, particularly Sanjay Rath, Camilla Sutton, and Bill Levesey have influenced me most. Okay, so I have to do before we start, I'm going to do a couple shameless plugs here. So if you don't have my book, it's on my website, and it's also available on Amazon, Finding Your Blind Spots in Vedic Astrology. And it's kind of in some ways, some of this of the book will contribute to the material in the course, because in my mind, um, Vedic astrology should show you things about yourself to release you from difficult patterns, to make you free. And so it's the light shining into the dark patterns. And the light then allows you to kind of change those patterns and become free. So my purpose with Vedic astrology is always to kind of help people find hidden things and to see their blind spots that block them from realizing their soul's purpose. Also, many of you know my Vedic Astrology Almanac, which is also on Amazon and on my website. Other classes coming. So this is the first lesson of this class, actually. And the second lesson will be on August 10th. I'm also teaching a class on relationships on Saturday starting in July, and you can email me about that. And for the first time in a while, I'm teaching a foundations class for people who don't know any Vedic astrology and want to start from the beginning, and that'll be on Sunday starting after Labor Day. Okay, so let me tell you a little something about my spiritual astrology class. You probably saw a little blurb on it. The word spiritual, is one of these words that gets overused quite a bit. Of course, all astrology is spiritual, but a lot of people come to me and they need help with relationships and they need help with finance and job, and that's, there's certainly spirituality underneath that. But in terms of a spiritual astrology class, what is the soul's purpose in this incarnation? What are its blocks to realizing its purpose? How do we understand Vedic deities in modern terms? We hear Shiva and Ganesh and our mind goes blank, and if we're not from India. And so I have a couple classes kind of talking about the psychological and archetypal nature of these deities and how we can relate to them. I'll talk a little about that today. Then we have the moksha houses. The 4th, 8th, and 12th houses in somebody's chart are called moksha houses. And moksha, of course, is about enlightenment and becoming free. So we'll have 3 classes kind of talking about the moksha houses and their blocks and how they block us from being realized. We'll look at the astrology of the enlightenment, how that could show up in somebody's chart. And we'll do a lot with Jaimini astrology, and I'll talk about Jaimini in a minute. Now, I divided the course into 2. Some people don't want to take an 18-week class or 17-week class. So I have divided the course into 2. The second part of the course, which will start in October, incorporates my Astro Yoga work, and I'll show you some of that today, which is there are poses that are connected to the planets, and when we have problems with those planets, we can do poses to rectify them. And we'll also talk a little bit about chakras in the planets. A lot of people know about chakras, and to me, the chakras and the yoga and healing modalities are all kind of tied together. I have a lesson on 6 systems of Indian philosophy and how that ties into actually the planets. And then even in block 1, I'm going to do some material on the D20 chart, which is called worship, but it's about spirituality and the blocks in our chart to staying with a spiritual teacher, and have our blocks around meditation and things like that. So how to diagnose those in a chart. And then we can look at the astrology of saints and see what their charts were like before they got enlightened. We also have material on Ishtadevatas and spiritual guides. You can see this in the chart. They're deities that are most connected to your evolution and how we can utilize and do spiritual practice to support our maximum growth. Then we'll look at Rahu and Ketu as blocks in our chart, but they're the core of the chart. And then we can time spiritual events in our life, like meeting a guru or getting initiated into a spiritual practice through a special dasha called Drig Dasha. So all of these are materials that, this material is not taught that much in this depth. I've been kind of wanting to teach this class for a couple years, and finally kind of coming out here. Last shameless plug, I will be speaking at the Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference in Sedona on moksha and blind spots, and it's November 22nd to the 25th. There is an early bird deadline of $245 if you sign up within the next 7 days. And Dennis wanted me to kind of tell people about it, so just wanted to know about that. I also am doing a retreat in Boone in October, and you'll hear more about that too. And finally, I have many other classes available on my website under the courses tab, so they're available. Some of them are on sale this week. Okay, let's get to the main material, and I apologize for the shameless plugs here. Okay, so there's two things I want to accomplish in this course. One, I want to give you the ocean in a drop and show you some of the couple excerpts from future lessons, and then I'm going to focus for about an hour on the Atmakarka, which is the soul in this incarnation. Okay, let's sign up material. Okay, so I stand on the shoulders of many great teachers. I certainly, no one makes anything up unless you cognize stuff like Parashara, but I'm very grateful to Robert Koch, who's one of my mentors, and Zoran Radislovich has a wonderful book on Atma Karaka. It's part of his brush up material. And my spiritual teacher, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, and of course, Camilla Sutton for all her continued support over the years. So, astrology, like I said, my colleagues kind of joke at me when I use the word spiritual astrology, because they in essence, yes, all astrology is spiritual. Most of the people who come for readings, have a meditation practice, have a guru, or interested in chanting and things like that. But that's not true with everybody. And actually, I do get people who kind of want to know their future, have not begun meditation, who want to know when their career is going to take off, and that's also important. But spiritual astrology is kind of like, why are we on this planet? Why am I suffering? What am I here to learn? What is the lesson of my soul in this lifetime? How can I relieve the blocks to my soul's evolution? A lot of this comes out of Jaimini astrology, which I'll talk about in a minute. So ultimately, astrology should unveil the illusions of the mind so that we can cast away ignorance and become enlightened. And that was always its aim. And the more I go back to the roots of Vedic astrology, I'm realizing in ancient times you were a Vedic pundit and you learned mantras and pujas, and the village people came to you, you looked at their chart, you did a puja, gave them a mantra, and they fed you, and it was like the village doctor. And there's always a very deep tie between mantras and the Vedas and astrology. And as time has gone on, there's been a little bit more separation as a lot of it's become westernized. And I'm trying to get back to its kind of its roots here. And at the same time, for those of you who know me, I'm really into kind of modernizing Vedic astrology, because many of us are turned off when we hear words like, Bhava and Atmakarka and, Bhava Suchika and things like that. So I'm always translating these Sanskrit words into English, because I think the brain shuts off a little bit. I mean, we need to know them because they show up at courses and books and things like that, but we also need to kind of not shut off the mind. So I'm going to show you a few samples. I can't show you sample slides from the entire course, but I want to at least give you a taste of some of the other lessons, and then we'll dive into Atmakarka. I mean, the Atmakarka lesson is going to be 4 lessons, actually. In the past, I've only done 1 in some of my other courses, but we really need to dig deeper with it, because, if you can understand your soul's purpose in this incarnation and its blocks and the karma that you're working out. It's, you know, very, very powerful. So these are the lessons that I'm going to kind of give you some information on. So here's a sample. I mean, obviously we're going to probably do about 20 Vedic deities, but let's take Hanuman. Everybody knows Hanuman from the Ramayana. He was the monkey god who was in service to Lord Ram, and he worked miracles to save Sita, who had been kidnapped, and we have this whole epic based on that. And Hanuman is connected to Mars, and Mars is connected to courage and devotion. I mean, the highest aspect of Mars is service. It's when people go into the military, they go into the service because service. You know, Mars is the kshatriya, the warrior who serves the king. Hanuman embodies the highest level of dedication and commitment. And so when Mars is really strong, we're very dedicated and very aware. Mars also is very logical, if you know that. So he has this quality of being a little bit of a trickster and a logician. And in this case, Hanuman is also the embodiment of bhakti, of love and devotion, and has a lot of shakti. A lot of strength and power. Shiva, sometimes, you know, we see this blue man holding a trident, you know, with a moon in his forehead, and we kind of get turned off a little bit. What really is Shiva? Is Shiva is somebody? Is he a form? Is he someone sitting in some place? You know, actually, Shiva is the entire universe. He's in every atom of the universe. Shiva doesn't have a body. He is no person at all. He symbolizes the unfathomable infinite divinity. And to make it comprehensible for young people, for children, they put him into a form and they painted him blue because he represents the infinity of the blue sky and the horizon. Shiva is really kind of the infinity, and it's the infinity that you dive into deep in meditation if you have a deep transcendental experience of kind of oneness with the universe. Shiva is the kind of principle from where everything has come, everything is sustained, and everything dissolves into it. So Shiva is the space, it is the consciousness. You know, we can never be out of step with Shiva because we are ultimately reconnecting with the universe, with the infinite, and where there are no bounds and no limits. So anyway, I'm kind of I've had this project for a number of years. I've been trying to kind of modernize all the Vedic deities. I'm kind of still working on it, but I wanted to, I want to do a whole maybe at least two lessons on it in the class, so that we, you know, often when if we study Vedic astrology in deep, the remedies involve mantras to certain deities, and we need to understand the deities and feel more comfortable with them in modern terms. And they exist on a very subtle level, and you can if you're very developed in your spirituality, you can, you know, feel them. And we can talk about remedies for connecting more to them so that they can help us on our journey. So the moksha houses. Elizabeth, I'm just going to do a sound check again. How's the breathing level? Is it making too much noise? We had a problem in my last class with sound. I don't know if Elizabeth can get on. Okay, I'm assuming the sound's okay. Okay, so let's look at the astrology of the moksha houses. And the moksha houses are the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th house. They're connected to the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And so moksha by nature is emotional. It's and the planets and problems in the moksha houses kind of create emotional grunge that kind of forces us to kind of seek God. And so we have to kind of look at them and how do we master the moksha houses in order to become enlightened. I have another slide on the moksha houses, but let me go there first. So I'm doing a talk in Sedona on moksha and blind spots, and let's just give a quick overview of it. So the fourth house, represents home, heart, and mother. I often see it afflicted. I mean, once in a while you get Venus in there or the moon in there, and the person's just really happy and is not a searcher. But in spiritual charts, I often see, Rahu or Saturn or Ketu or Mars in there, and home life is not happy. The emotional heart is seeking something. And in the fourth house, when it's afflicted, starts our search for relief for suffering. And then the eighth house is the house of, people always fear the eighth house the most because it's a place of accidents and acute illnesses, and if it's afflicted, it can cause, all kinds of problems. And it's there to kind of point us to the ninth house, which is the divine. And the eighth house is really is the transcendental mystical realm of experience. It's connected to the eighth sign of the zodiac, Scorpio, which is really kind of this mystical place where we can kind of transcend and be free of karma. But most people don't know the mysteries of the eighth house, which is learning meditation and having regular spiritual experience. And when that doesn't happen, then the eighth house creates all kinds of problems to beckon us to find the divine. Now, the 12th house, the other moksha house, is a house of sacrifice. Often people talk about it as expenditures, which it is, but it's a house of letting go and finding the ultimate self-realization. But often there are kind of blocks there. The 12th house is right after sunrise, and the sun's on the horizon. You can't see any planets in the sky, and it's kind of like any planets you put in the 12th house are kind of blinded. They're kind of blind spots. You can't kind of see the problems there, and they're kind of almost unconscious, subconscious problems. They create a lot of difficulties in your life, but you're not even aware of them. So we often have to kind of unlock the mysteries of the 12th house. My YouTube channel, Financial Astrology by Barry Rosen, does have a 2-hour videotape on the 12th house if you want to watch that. And you certainly, all the previews of all my classes are on my YouTube channel. So let's look at the 12th house. So the blocks to moksha are in the 12th house. So if you have Venus in the 12th house, it may be drawn to sexual indulgences that uses up too much energy. And so that energy is not moving higher to the crown chakra for self-realization. So it can be a problem. Sometimes it, for everybody's individual, and I'm not judging sex, but Venus often can cause too many expenditures, unconscious shopping habits, and then you build up too much debt, and then you're spending too much time luxuriating in the outer world and not seeking for the inner life. Saturn in the 12th house, which I have, and I think I've just begun to understand it after many years. It's the 12th house is a house of service. Actually, the Vedic astrologers consider the 12th house the most important house because it's about moksha, and to gain moksha we have to give. So it's a house connected to sacrifice. In fact, it's also one of the marriage houses, even though everybody thinks the 7th house is marriage. The 12th house is about sacrifice in marriage to continue to do the race and have children. So the 12th house is always kind of filled with frustration, expenditures. And when you put Saturn in, I have Saturn in the 12th house. I've been kind of so involved. Half my life was spent doing seva and service for others. I have an exalted Saturn in there, so it's a little bit exaggerated and out of balance, and kind of took me out of the blind world of material existence. And I was too busy on finding God and doing service for my spiritual path, and I've just come to recognize that it's kind of a block actually, and I have to kind of rebalance it. Saturn in the 12th house creates way too many over expenses too, and that's been a big block because I'm not free to kind of spend more time with my guru, although I spent half the year traveling the world with him, but it was great. So keys to unlocking the 12th house and unlocking the planets in the 12th house is certainly is meditation and service. 12th house is, the moksha houses always do well with meditation. So service is very important. Is the key to the 12th house. It's through selfless service that we let go of our ego, and if we have the grace of an enlightened guru, that we can kind of transcend and become realized. But there's so many potential blind spots and controlling vices in the 12th house that we can easily get blocked. Planets aspecting the 12th house too, that could be the case. Venus is considered the best planet for the 12th house, but we just showed you that she can really get involved in sexual affairs and secret things like that. And Ketu, which is the planet of moksha, that wants to create, that wants to move you toward enlightenment, actually gets a little out of balance in the 12th house. We almost can't live in the world if we have Ketu in the 12th house, because we just want to meditate all the time. Rahu in the 12th house creates very intense psychological rumblings, leading to addictions and over sexual stimulation. One thing about the 12th house is it's kind of subconscious grunge, and meditation can take care of it. But before we meditate, we usually have just a lot of subconscious rumblings there, and most people when they're young who haven't gotten into meditation can't deal with them, and it leads them to addiction, over sexual stimulation. Spiritual people with a strong 12th house may want to run away to the ashram in order to kind of heal their emotional trauma. I did that when I was young. I have a debilitated moon, and meditation and escaping to the ashram was a wonderful way to kind of deal with it. Jupiter in the 12th house, kind of lack of interest in material development, overindulgence, education losses, feeling betrayed, feeling unsupported. We can go into that more in detail, but just want to give you a list. So the key in the 12th house is teaching others and sharing spiritual wisdom and teaching people meditation and doing service. And that gets us through the problems of the 12th house. So let me go back to some of my other sections. This is just giving an overview of the class. So in my Varga class, I just got to do about 40 minutes on the D20 chart. I'm hoping to spend at least 3 classes on it in this class. The D20 chart is the chart of spirituality and worship. And whenever we do any Varga chart, we always have to connect it to the main chart. So we have to look at the 5th house, the house of mantras and spiritual practice, and the 9th house, the house of kind of religion. But and we certainly have to start there in analyzing spirituality in any chart. But we can look more deeply into the D20 chart to see your problems. The 5th house in the D1 will tell you something about whether you can do meditation. You put Rahu afflicted in the 5th house, you're going to have trouble meditating. The mind's way too restless. You certainly want Jupiter in there, or the sun particularly. If the Lord of the 5th house is afflicted too, there may be problems with spiritual practice. The 5th house, the 6th house, in the D20 chart too, the 5th house will be important for mantras too, and it'll tell you something about your path. The 6th house in the D20 will show you obstacles on the spiritual path. To me, I always, when people are having problems with their spiritual path, I always look at the 6th house to see what's going on there. If they've got Mars there may be too much ego. There's too much of a problem. If they have Rahu in the 1st house in the D20, the 1st house always tells us, in any Varga chart, tells us the strength of that signification. So you put Rahu in the 1st house, in the house of spirituality. Rahu's a rebel. He doesn't want to follow anything traditional. He's not going to follow a guru. He's going to kind of make up his own religion and go his own way. So we're going to look at, you have to look at things like that. The D20 is fascinating. You can see all kinds of problems with your guru. I've got Rahu and Jupiter in my 9th house, which is the house of guru in the D20. And I'm in a Rahu period now, and so I'm feeling a little bit rebellious. I'm not a traditional person, but that wasn't always the case. So during different cycles, your spirituality is going to change. So one of the things you can tell in the D chart is what you can do for spiritual advancement. So we could look at the strongest planet in the D20 to decide what to worship. And each of the planets, is connected to different deities. So Jupiter and the Sun are connected to Shiva, Vishnu to Mercury. Actually, Rahu is connected to Durga because we need to remedy the craving nature of Durga slays the Rakshasas and the demons so that we can settle down. And Rahu is actually a very spiritual planet. Actually, once we learn how to kind of manage it. The fifth lord in the D20 may reveal something about spiritual practice. I tend to mostly look at the Ishtadevata, which I don't know, probably won't get to that today. The Ishtadevata is the 12th house from the Atmakarka in one of the charts. And it's very easy to find, but it actually kind of reveals what deity is most responsible for getting you enlightened. And so, for example, long before I knew any of this, I was very attracted to Shiva, and Shiva is my Ishtadevata when I started learning Jaimini astrology. And my spiritual teacher kind of knew that, and one day he gave me a tape of Shiva Rudram to listen to on Mondays, and I had no idea why. I just was drawn to it, and I listened to it all the time. But you can see these things very deeply in the D20 charts, and then we might even look at the D5 chart, which is connected to the fifth house in mantras too. I did teach that in my Barka class that just finished. So to me, in looking at the D20 chart and the D1 chart, what are the blocks on the spiritual path, and how do you get through them? Is Mars too strong? Is your ego? Usually Mars and Rahu are the big problems if they're afflicted, because basically ego and individuality and doing it on your own, being a lone ranger, are kind of the biggest blocks. But there are all kinds of blocks on the spiritual path, and we want to analyze them. Okay, now another part of my class, and this is connected, is my interest in Hatha Yoga, and using connecting astrology and Hatha Yoga and remedial therapies for yoga therapy. And for those of you who are interested, on my website, lately it's been appearing on the sidebar. There's a 3-hour tape on this for $24.95, but it's just kind of an introduction to this material. But one of my teachers, many years ago, I took a class, and he was connecting the planets to different yoga postures, and he showed me 3 sets of poses that were used to. One was quieting ones, which relaxing poses, which are called tamasic poses. One are poses that are rajasic; they activate the body, and then the balancing poses are sattvic. Now, depending on the planet in your chart, you may need a certain pose to kind of activate it. So for example, let's say you have a weak Mars. Let's say you have Mars in Cancer in your chart. That means your adrenals may be weak, and you may be tired all the time, and you may have trouble with energy and getting things done, all those things that Mars is good for. So if you do the frog pose, it stimulates the adrenals and gives you a shot of purge. Sometimes this is called the crow pose. Lately I've been calling it the frog pose, but it's you kind of put your knees into your elbows. Now, if you just stimulate that area, see where her knees are going, it will immediately give you the shot of energy because it stimulates the adrenals. And instead of reaching for the candy bar or a coffee, you can actually just go into this pose and get this shot of courage. And so for people, sometimes you need some courage just to go into a meeting, and if you can't even get on the floor to do this pose, you can kind of just stimulate that area of under your arms, and it just gives you extra energy. You can all practice that, but it's very powerful. Practice this pose. But this is connected to Mars, and if you do there's a Vastu, or a directional energy for the planets, and so if you do the yoga postures connected to the planets, there's more power. So when you do the Mars poses to the south, which is the direction for Mars, you you get even more power. And I've played with this. I'm very sensitive. And there is a difference in terms of what directions you do your yoga postures to. And so I have a whole class on this. We'll do some of it, and I think I'm going to develop some new material in this class. I've got Astro Yoga 1, which is on videotape, and you can get that if you're interested in this. But I'm very interested in how we can use different poses to quiet and stimulate various chakras to balance physical and emotional problems. So people who are stuck and unable to act and move forward, sometimes have a weak Mars. Maybe it's afflicted by Saturn, maybe it's in Cancer and it's in the wrong house, like, the 12th, and they're just kind of stuck. And so you give them, the frog pose, and there are other poses you can give them, and it kind of helps. It becomes kind of a way to unlock some of their energy and to release some of the blocks. So, mantras are powerful, but people are really into kind of physical things these days, and it's really easy to help anybody with yoga therapy with these techniques that I teach. For example, Mercury is connected to the Cobra pose, which balances the mind. And if your moon is weak, maybe you need to do a headstand or a shoulder stand to kind of quiet the mind. And these work. I mean, I've played with this yoga therapy for years, and it's quite powerful. So I've been wanting to develop a lesson. I have some of this on my videotape online, but on chakras and the planets. There's so many different interpretations of them, and I've kind of played with them for years. I'm wanting to develop a kind of a definitive to our videotape on this during this class. And my teacher has taught me some things about it, and it's definitely true. And I've read a number of other things, and I'm kind of a scientist. I like to see how things work. But the crown chakra is obviously connected to the sun. The divine energy kind of flows in through the crown chakra if it's open and receptive, and it moves through the whole body up and down. And then the moon's connected to the brow chakra, which is connected to our higher intuition and our higher self. And then Mars and Saturn, to me, are connected to alertness in the third eye. So when you do the warrior pose, you're kind of stimulating Mars to be alert. The warrior has to be alert. Saturn and Mars go together in this way. Jupiter is connected to the throat chakra. We know when we get choked up with gratitude, which is very connected to Jupiter, we feel it in the throat. We don't feel it in the solar plexus. I think the heart center has multiple planets connected to it. I think they're all the benefics. Mercury, Venus, Sun, Moon, and Jupiter, I think all are very connected to the heart chakra. And if Saturn's blocking the heart chakra, then we have hate, or we have the inability to love. And it's also connected to the way the energies move up and down through the chakra systems. And it's a whole kind of fascinating talk. Obviously, Mars and the Sun are connected to the solar plexus, are connected to power and expressing power. Venus, in my mind, is connected to the second chakra, connected to creativity and procreativity, reproduction. So sexual organs are down there. To me, that's all Venus. Some people think Jupiter is connected to the second chakra but I think Jupiter is kind of a higher energy. And then Saturn is connected to the base chakra. It protects our infrastructure and roots us to the earth. It's responsible for kind of rooting us to the ground. And I feel like, in spiritual people, you often find these very developed higher chakras, but their base chakra is kind of weak, and they need to do certain exercises and poses to strengthen the base chakra and increase their presence in the world and their finances and things like that. So kind of fascinated about all this. And I've got some advanced work developing here on planets in Astro Yoga 1, which is on videotape already, is about planets and poses. And I have material in development on signs and nakshatras also. So it's quite kind of fascinating. So that brings us to kind of the core purpose for what I want to go into today, which is kind of moving forward. Now, I am getting some questions here, so I hope there's not some. Okay, George asked about Donald Trump, and we'll have to. I'm not going to talk about that now, but thank you. Good question, George. But I'm not doing political astrology now, but I may, if I have time, I'm not even sure I've looked at it, but thank you for bringing that up. Okay. Rayanne had a question. Sounds fine. Okay, thank you, Rayanne. Okay, so some of you have studied Jaimini astrology, some of you have not, and Jaimini astrology becomes the essence of this class, and we'll spend 5 or 6 lessons on Jaimini astrology. Now, Jaimini astrology is not separate from Parashara astrology. Jaimini was either Parashara's son or he was a devotee of Parashara, and he wrote his own sutras called the Upadesha Sutras, which go into more detail. So Parashara talks about Argala and Arudas and, you know, a lot of these things that are part of Jaimini astrology, but he doesn't fully expound on them as much. And so it's kind of like in olden days, you know, they didn't have videotape recorders. There's a 2-hour lecture, and, you know, the students created a rhyming sutra, a poetic sutra, so they could remember the essence of that lecture. And so in many cases, Parashara's sutras are like that. And Jaimini was probably present at the original talks, and then he did his own sutras and commentary and elaboration on what Parashara said. So they're not really separate kinds of astrology. They're very connected. Jaimini astrology is much more spiritual in its talking about the soul's journey and its karmic lessons. And there are a lot of things in Jaimini astrology that are very powerful. The essence of Jaimini astrology talks about the Karkas, which are, you know, the planets from the highest degree to the lowest degrees, and these become a way of predicting things. But the Atmakarka, which is the planet with the highest number of degrees in the chart, becomes the king of the chart. If you read my article, it's on my blog about it. It's the planet with the highest number of degrees. Somehow, some people use 8 Karakas instead of 7 and include Rahu. Sanjay Rath uses 8. K.N. Rao uses 7. And we have to talk about that controversy at some point. But the Atmakarka tells you a lot about your purpose on the planet, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. And then there's a chart created from the Atmakarka. If you put the Atmakarka at the center of the chart in the Devamsha that it's in and rotate the Devamsha chart around it, you get a chart called the Karakamsha Navamsha chart. And then there's a chart that integrates the soul's purpose with that of the in this incarnation in the physical world. And I find really good information from that. I don't know if we'll get to talk about it too much today, but this is all kind of, we'll spend 5 or 6 lessons on this in the class. So today I wanted to actually do an actual lesson and give out some knowledge. We have about an hour to do that, and then we can take some questions. So I have a bunch of, when you get, I will send, for those of you, I will send you a copy of the slideshow, so you don't have to take copious notes. If you take notes, you miss half the lesson. So it is recorded. You can listen to it again. I will send you the slideshow. You can read it. So some of this is just for you when you read the slideshow. So the Atmakarka is the king of the chart. And he's the guiding planet for lessons of this incarnation. He's not for the lessons of the last incarnation. He's not necessarily for the lessons of this incarnation. It's a planet that governs this incarnation. And he often creates difficult lessons so that we learn what we're supposed to learn in this lifetime. in many ways, he's like the first house lord in the importance, but it's much deeper because he also is connected to the 8th house and to past lives. So the Atmakarka is connected to the first house because he's king of the chart. He's actually more important in some ways than the Rashi lord. But in the same ways, he's bringing in the suffering of the 8th house to support the soul toward its purpose and growth on this planet. And this can often be bring a lot of mental distress. The problem with the Atmakarka is, if you have a strong Atmakarka, let's say it's exalted, it's in good houses, it's got good aspects, the incarnation can be very well, and the lessons in the incarnation can be very well. And often I see strong Atmakarkas and spiritually developed people when I do their charts. Sometimes the Atmakarka can be very weak. If it's debilitated, if it's badly afflicted by other malefics, the whole life is kind of difficult. So it has that kind of importance. If the Lagna is conjunct the Atmakarka, and that happens pretty rarely, I don't see it very often, then there's a chance for good spiritual advancement in this lifetime. There's a lot of coherence. So one of the things that I want to look at in this lesson is going into the Atmakarka in more depth. I'm going to take a quick look at questions. Okay. So the Atmakarka is the planet most open to your higher self and to spirituality and to moving you beyond worldly existence. The problem is if you go through an Atmakarka period, dasha period, sometimes it's hell. I mean, because you have your most powerful lessons to learn at that time, and so that's why it's the good cop and the bad cop. It's kind of it's very powerful for the soul, but at the same time, it creates the most difficult lessons. And so following your soul's path requires one to understand the message of sacrifice, meditation, and seeing beyond illusion. And often the Atmakarka is very caught up in illusion because we need to break illusion if we're going to become free and become enlightened. So, for example, I'm a little bit abstract. Just to say, like, if Venus is the Atmakarka, it's a planet with the highest number of degrees in your chart, and Venus is also the Karaka for relationships. So it could be that you had a very difficult time with relationships in past lives, and in this lifetime you have all kinds of problems in relationships because the Atmakarka is trying to teach you how to be good in relationships in this lifetime. For those of you who read my books and articles, I love the movie Groundhog Day, and it's Bill Murray. I'm sure you all know the movie. It's a very spiritual movie about a man who's stuck in kind of reincarnating through his nightmares and trying to become a better person. And to me, that's about the soul's journey. And eventually, Bill Murray learns to be a kind person, a loving person, to help people, to be of service, and he transcends his selfish ego, self-gratifying personality, and grows. And so the Atmakarka, I think, is kind of representative of many lifetimes and the teaching of what we need to learn in this lifetime. And so, like in the same way that we diagnose the chart lord, what's the dignity, what house is it in, where is it in the Devamsha chart, is it what's aspecting it, are there any yogas involved in it? All those things also are just as important for giving us information about the soul in this incarnation, the Atmakarka. And the Atmakarka is always there creating lessons to show you the truth. So what's the difference between the sun and the Atmakarka? Because the sun is the natural signification for the soul, and it shows us the universal soul and how we identify ourselves. The sun is the Karaka for the divine, and we identify ourselves with what the soul shares with other incarnated souls. The Atmakarka is actually your individual weaknesses and strengths inherited from previous lives and what the soul has to achieve in this life. So it reflects the struggles and flaws and problems with illusion. So the sun is much purer. It represents the divine in the chart. The Atmakarka is really kind of our flawed self that is here struggling and learning to transcend illusion. The material world, so there's a difference between kind of the Rashi chart, which shows us the material world, and our desires in the material world, and those are the people who come to me for readings about better relationships and more money, and when am I going to get a raise at work and all that kind of stuff. And that's we have those desires. They're a very much important part of our existence. The Atmakarka shows the soul's material goals and spiritual ones, and speeds it toward enlightenment. So the Atmakarka can have material desires also, but it also is about transcending the material to move us toward freedom. I'm going to go through this more individuality. So sometimes the Atmakarka can be debilitated. So here's some things that you can look at in the same way you would look at the chart lord. So if the Atmakarka is debilitated or exalted, debilitated planets create humility and the ability to surrender to the guru and spirituality, and they may be more powerful for spiritual growth. So here's a funny case that if your Atmakarka is debilitated, it actually may be better for you, because it may actually be able to, its life may be kind of messed up to the point where maybe the material doesn't work so well, but it develops a lot of humility, so it's willing to find God and listen to the guru and transcend the world. So debilitated planets as Atmakarakas get disillusioned, and then that helps us transcend and find God. There are all kinds of subtle things we'll learn here. I don't want to overwhelm you with too many details. Malefics that are Atmakarka actually indicate a higher degree of spiritual advancement than natural benefics. Now, this is funny. So if you have, if Saturn or Mars or Rahu or Ketu cannot be an Atmakarka, it's a natural karka of enlightenment. Saturn or Rahu or Mars as Atmakarka may actually show more lifetimes of spiritual development than if you have Jupiter, Venus, or Mercury. And that's kind of hard to understand, but it means the soul has passed through many prior lifetimes of spiritual purification. And I said debilitated Atmakarakas are more humble. They may have trouble expressing material gains, but may be very spiritual people. And again, it depends what you want in life. Again, if you have a debilitated Atmakarka, yeah, you may not be making it with a big home and a huge bank account, but you may be a very happy person dedicated to your meditation practice and your guru, and that may have more meaning for you in this life, and that's why it's you've chosen it, and it's why it's functioning. Sometimes you'll get an Atmakarka planet that's debilitated, and the debilitation is canceled. As most of you who know Vedic astrology, I would say 80% of the time there's so many ways to cancel a debilitated planet that it usually happens. And when it doesn't happen, it's a kind of a real problem. The Atmakarka debilitation, if it's canceled, is actually good, because the person has deep spiritual development and is humble and is not drawn to material gratification, lust, wealth, and power, which often block us on the spiritual path. Now, if the Atmakarka is afflicted by a malefic, it may have a mischievous quality to it, and they'll be purified over time. So sometimes you'll get Saturn aspecting the Atmakarka, and there's special Jaimini aspects that we'll learn. I'm not going to go into them now, but Jaimini aspects often show deeper kind of DNA qualities, deeper rooted qualities. But if a malefic is aspecting the Atmakarka, it's not really a bad thing. It may mean that there are problems early in life, and that suffering and purification will advance the soul. So when does the Atmakarka kind of manifest its lessons? So during the Dasha period of the Atmakarka. So my I have Saturn as my Atmakarka. Now, I'm not bringing up too many charts in this class because I do use a lot of charts and illustrations in my classes, obviously, but I want to get through some abstract points. My first class tends to be, oh God, uh, I'm having some my computer crashed, so I'm actually kind of wondering what happened. Oh, jeez. Anyway, this has been Saturn K2. Have been playing all kinds of wonderful games on me this week. And that chart just had worked for the previous class, but it wasn't working here. Wait, is this it now? Okay. Anyway, I'm just going to bring up anybody, Albert Einstein. I don't know why. My computer crashed and I had to reinstall it, and obviously it's playing games on me now. And actually, I'm not even going to get to use it, even though it worked 2 hours ago. So Mercury wants me to laugh here. I've got Saturn Atmakarka. I'm pretty serious. So I'm always getting put upon for a laugh. Okay, so getting back to the main question, when does your Atmakarka lessons, when do they manifest? So they manifest during the Dasha period. So I have Saturn at 27 degrees of Libra. It's got the highest number of degrees of any planet in my chart. And so whenever I go through Saturn periods or Saturn bhuktis, it tends to bring out deep lessons of soul lessons for me. And you can easily go through, I just did a chart where somebody had Saturn Atmakarka and they were just at the end of a 19-year Saturn period. So their whole Saturn periods are difficult anyway, but Saturn period as Atmakarka meant it was the deepest soul lessons of their life that they were working out. So that's when they manifest. Now the Atmakarka is often at the end of a sign. So it's like often at 29 degrees. And if you know Vedic astrology, if you put a planet at 29 degrees, it's called Bhava Sandhi or Rashi Sandhi, which means it's very weak. Planets at the end of a sign have trouble manifesting their values. But those are material values. But the Atmakarka planet will still be very spiritual. So again, if you have planets at 29 degrees, they may have trouble manifesting their house values and their Karaka values, but they still can be very spiritual because of the connection to the Atmakarka. Again, the Atmakarka is here to support spiritual evolution and to transport the soul to a plane of higher existence in the next life. So often, the Atmakarka will be Gandanta. And Gandanta, for those of you who know, is planets at the end of the water signs, 2920 to 2959 Pisces, 2920 to 2959 Cancer, 2920 to 2959 Scorpio. They're very kind of sensitive points of the zodiac. And if the Atmakarka is in the Gandanta, in one of the emotional water signs, it means there's a lifetime of very difficult knots that have to be untied, very complex personalities, unfulfilled material desires, unexpected events, and complicated inner struggles. So, Gandanta is difficult for any planet. And if it's the Atmakarka, which it often can be because it's, late in the sign, it will create deep, untangled knots that you can spend a lifetime unknotting as the soul is in transition toward moksha in this life. Pisces Gandanta wants to stay in the state of self-realization and the bliss of the divine. Pisces is all about moksha anyway, and so when you have Pisces Gandanta Atmakarka, you're really kind of having trouble living in the world. You want to kind of just find God. Cancer gone down to Atmakarka is connected to Ashlesha, which is connected to Mercury, and it wants to stay in the intellectual realm and not move into the material world of Leo. And Scorpio, Atmakarka, Gandanta doesn't want to give up material pleasures. That's the most difficult one. If you watch Saturn go through there a few years ago, it was just hell for most people because it's just a place of deep emotional grunge. Sometimes Atmakarka planets are retrograde. So a retrograde Atmakarka has a strong desire to manifest a particular kind of destiny in this lifetime. And the soul has a deep-rooted desire to manifest in this lifetime. It cannot be at peace until that is attained. Atmakarka and combustion. So if the planet is very close to the sun, it takes away its material manifestation. Most of you have read my article on combustion in my books. Combustion makes people more spiritual. If it's the chart lord or the planet involved, and because the sun is the divine, and so planets very close to the sun get the light of the divine infused into their soul and get uplifted on the spiritual level. But as you know, combust planets often have trouble manifesting on the material level. And again, retrograde Mercury and Venus are not considered go through combustion because they're behind the sun, and so they're not a problem. Mars sometimes is not considered combust because fire does not extinguish fire. So Mars can handle being close to the sun. You know, the two fire guys. Retrograde. So I'm not going to go into this now because I've got to. So if the Atmakarka is identical to the sun or the moon, so once in a while the chart, let's say if you're Cancer rising and your moon is Atmakarka, or if you're Leo rising and your sun is Atmakarka, then there's a lot of coherence in the soul. The soul has great abilities to understand its existence, to be involved in Gyan Yoga and understand the higher truth. So that when you get that kind of coherence, you don't see it that much. I mean, I have a friend who's Leo rising. He's got Sun Atmakarka in the 9th house. He's a very, very spiritually developed man and very aware of his purpose on the planet, but he also has some blind spots that are blocking him from realizing his goal, and he doesn't really see it, and he hasn't asked me for a reading, so I can't tell him. Now, the Atmakarka gives awareness and consciousness to the person. So it's if there's dignity, the person will be alert as to what he has to do. So this is really important. So, I mean, I just had a chart where somebody has Saturn Atmakarka and it's in Aries and it's retrograde. And, you know, they're really suffering, as you might expect, but they don't have an awareness of what they need to do because the Atmakarka, if it doesn't have dignity, creates a lot of problems, and we see that in lesser evolved souls. If the Atmakarka has a lot of dignity in its own sign, exalted in the Navamsha chart, exalted by sign, Mula Trikuna, then it really has a lot of consciousness, a lot of awareness, and to be alert to what it needs to do. And if it's debilitated, it has to work 3 times as hard to figure out its purpose in life, and it suffers a lot, and there's no awareness of the mistakes that it's making. Now, the Atmakarka represents desires that are stuck to the soul from one life to another. So sometimes they're deeper karmic impressions, and in a sense, they become a central core to working on in this lifetime. And there's 2 levels of them that we'll talk about in the course: personal desires and more karma that's connected to the outer world, to our interaction with our family. And sometimes we have those things are at odds. We also have to look at the Atmakarka in a rectified D60 chart, and the D60 chart changes every 2 minutes. And this will give us information about the past life and how it links to the present. And in the D60 chart, and again, I would show you examples, but my chart, my program just crashed. The Kendras houses, the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th houses from the Atmakarka in the D60 will reveal the dominant karmas from past lives. So there's a lot you can see about past lives and the Atmakarka and even those of you who have studied with me before, and we've done some work on this, I've got a lot of new material that I'm going to be adding in this class. Now, the Atmakarka is very important in the Navamsha chart. We usually actually rotate the Atmakarka to the first house in the Atmakarka chart. And it's called the Karakamsha chart, and this creates what I call a soul chart. It really tells us about the soul's talents that it's inherited, the deities that will help evolve it toward its enlightenment, and it will also indicate the power of the soul to manifest its desires from the past. Again, if in the Navamsha chart, if the Atmakarka is in its own sign, Mula Trikuna exalted over Gautama, then it manifests, luck and the ability to manifest its desire. So the Atmakarka in the Navamsha chart is really important in terms of looking at dignity. I've got mine in Gemini. I wouldn't, I'd say it's kind of mixed. But you will see Vargotama, Atmakarka, and that's very important. Now, one of the reasons Vargotama is very important is because of these kind of what I call soul connections and soul coherence. And people always teach you that Vargotama is very important in basic Jyotish classes, but they don't tell why. And it's really, I've got some questions here, which I'll answer in a minute. The Vargotama is so important because there's often kind of soul coherence. So when you have Vargotama planets, it means there's a lot of coherence to fulfill your desires in this lifetime, whether they're spiritual or material. And that's why Vargotama is so important for dignity. Now, sometimes there's a lack of coherence between in the Atmakarka. It's in bad houses in the D9 chart. It's has no dignity. It's debilitated in the D9 chart. Then our desires are obstructed, and it creates problems. And there's difficulty in expressing your talents or health problems. So the Atmakarka in the D9 chart is very, very key. Now, let's look at the various Atmakarkas, and I will go through them. And this is something you can, do on your own, because the planet with the highest number of degrees in your chart is your Atmakarka. So I need to drink a little water here. I may pause and take some questions here because if I talk too much. Okay, so I've got some questions here. I heard you on YouTube video, Sanjay, say the degrees of a planet seem about how much karma a person has brought into this life. How does that relate to Atmakarka? Is the highest degree because of the amount of karma? Good question, Judy. To me, the Atmakarka, because it has the highest number of degrees, it often does have a lot of maturity. And that maturity, if there's dignity, means that it's inherited, it's learned a lot about lessons of that planet the whole life, over many lifetimes. And it brings that maturity in there. If there's not a lot of dignity there, then it may be making the same mistakes like Bill Murray and Groundhog Day over and over again, and it has to keep reliving that nightmare. So I do think that planets with more degrees, because have elder status, and they do bring in a strong amount of life karma. But again, depending on dignity, that life karma could be challenging, or it could be, rewarding. And sometimes the Atmakarka can really bless you with a lot of past life. There's always some deep lessons with it, but sometimes it can really bless you with a lot of wonderful things too. I hope that answers your question, Judy. I'm unmuted. Did I answer your question, Judy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because when Sanjay said it, he said the degrees represent how much karma someone comes into the world with. So the lower your degrees, the less karma that you have. So that's why I'm trying to understand, why is the Atmakarka the number with the highest degree, not the lowest?
Right. Okay. So thank you for clarifying that question. Yeah, I think I like what Sanjay says there. The highest number, the degree with the highest number of planets does have the most karma. It means it has the most to learn, but sometimes that karma, if there's dignity, the lifetime may not be as have as much suffering as some other planet with lower number of degrees, So that's how I might look at it. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you, Judy.
It makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, so so let's go into Atmakarka. I'm going to mute you, Judy. When the sun is the Atmakarka, then there's little else for the soul to pursue than the true purpose of existence, God realization. Material pursuits may be challenging. Again, when material pursuits are challenging, it points us to God. I mean, I have a friend, and her Atmakarka is in the 12th house, and nothing's really worked in her life. But she's an incredible being, and she has a lot of soul development, and she gets by, but she's an extremely spiritual person. So because the material things in her life weren't working, it pointed her more toward God. And that's the Atmakarka can often do that, and that's why it's part of the spiritual astrology course. The sun wants position, fame, and recognition, and the Atmakarka can take it away. And I have and this is very funny. Like I said, I have a friend who has an exalted sun in the 9th, and he's Leo rising, and he radiates such incredible power. He's one of the strongest people you'll ever meet, and yet he has a very, very difficult life. His finances never came through. He's probably one of the more brilliant people I know, and yet he's not recognized at work anymore. He's had a lot of health problems. And here's a case where, the Atmakarka is actually kind of almost teaching him humility. One of the things that the Sun Atmakarka teaches, if it's that strong, is that it teaches humility, because it's trying to take away fame. So the Atmakarka often does opposite of what you think it would do. It actually creates problems in that area. So the sun always wants position, fame, and recognition. Sun Atmakarka may take it away because it wants you to find God or to humble you. So when the sun is Atmakarka, and it doesn't have dignity. My friend's sun has a lot of dignity, but if the sun is like in Libra or something and it's Atmakarka, it may create a lack of order and organization, a lack of discipline, focus, and clarity, maybe an empty battery and no power. Will not be able to rise in life. There may be ego issues and issues with father, maybe overbearing boss at work. So one of the ways to kind of understand the Atmakarka then is, particularly when it's afflicted, is that it creates kind of the dark side of the Karaka. So sun is about father, sun is about ego, sun is about status at work. And when the Atmakarka is afflicted, and then it brings out all the darker qualities of the sun. And that means one has to spend their life learning humility, or being in leadership, or finding the energy and clarity and organizational power that it lacks. And so you see the things, the Atmakarka often teaches the the things that we're not good at that we need to learn in this lifetime. And so that's why it's kind of a problem. Moon is Atmakarka. When the moon is Atmakarka, the soul is restless and in search of true emotion to pursue the purpose of divine love, and it wants to manifest in all its relationships. So, the moon is kind of into bhakti, so it's like Krishna. It wants pure devotion. It wants pure divine love. It wants to find that pure devotional love in its relationships, and that's the highest aspect of the Atmakarka when it's strong. But when the Atmakarka is weak, there may be a person may be oversexed and have a problem with, sexual attraction to married ladies. They may be unstable. They may be antisocial. They may be unable to handle emotional problems. So again, if Moon Atmakarka in Scorpio connected with Mars or something, just kind of an emotional mess, and their life is a whole emotional mess. So there'll be problems with the Karaka values. Moon is connected to home, family, and married life, right? Those don't work. They create problems because they want to move the person to God. Again, if the Moon Atmakarka is waxing, has dignity, let's say connected to Jupiter or Venus or in good houses, then these problems are not as advanced. Now, my experience in looking at Atmakarka is I find that spiritual people have pretty advanced Atmakarkas, and I don't find too much affliction in them. I mean, most of the charts I do, I get very kind of developed people coming to me, but once in a while I get people that are a mess coming to me and wanting a free reading because their life doesn't work and stuff like that. And you look at the Atmakarka and it's debilitated Saturn in a bad house, like the 8th or something, so it's kind of like that. I think, but the important thing is to help people understand that the lessons of the Atmakarka are to obviously grow in those areas that are weak in one's life, and also to move towards the spirituality, because that which we need most is kind of falling apart. So the sun needs to learn humility, overcome pride, self-importance, which means one has to do a great job in service to humanity, selfless service. My guru has Sun Atmakarka, and he's an embodiment of seva and service to humanity and selfless service. And he teaches and leads people through his humility to do service and help the world. And so it's an example where he's living kind of he's living the highest value of his Atmakarka, because he's overcome all the major lessons that were connected to it. Moon Atmakarka needs to learn the meaning of compassion and how to develop sensitivities and concerns for others, understanding and happiness. So if you have Moon Atmakarka, you need to learn compassion and being sensitive to others, and it may be a problem. Mars Atmakarka needs to learn nonviolence. Again, Mars likes to fight. Buddhist priests often have Mars Atmakarka. It's really kind of interesting. Mars Atmakarka has to learn how to surrender, to concede defeat, and to be patient when things don't work, rather than getting into violence. So again, it brings out the opposite quality. Afflicted Mars can give laziness, negative thinking, weakness of the nerves, may lack energy, physical strength, and may sleep a lot. So, again, you get Mars Atmakarka in Cancer or something like that. The person, just may be very weak with their energy, and they were lazy in past lives, and they need to somehow find the energy to kind of get through this life, but they can't, because they were born with this kind of weak Mars, and it's Atmakarka. And so the Atmakarka lessons are the hardest to learn, because sometimes we're born, if the planet's afflicted, we have disability and we can't get through them. Mercury Atmakarka needs to speak truth and to communicate only those things that are meaningful and uplift others. They need to face the truth and tolerate other spirituality. So again, Mercury is the Karaka for speech. And so if you're Mercury Atmakarka, then you should never lie. You need to learn, you need to go to Toastmasters to learn how to communicate well. But maybe if Mercury is in Pisces, in your in this Atmakarka, those are really hard to do, and you have to work 3 times as hard to get them done. But that's why you're here. When Mercury is Atmakarka, Mercury is the prince. It's kind of the child. It's irresponsible. It has trouble focusing. It's superficial. The child. Mercury is the child, and so Mercury Atmakarka has to learn to grow up and be responsible. It needs to be careful in speech and not speak harshly at anybody. So, and it needs to learn lessons around friends. Again, Mercury is the Karaka for friendship, and Mercury Atmakarka may have trouble with making friends or having friends. I have an ex-friend who's Mercury Atmakarka, and it's in her 12th house, and she is continually losing all her friends because she has no idea how she shows up, and she desperately wants friendship, but everybody she comes in contact with who becomes a new friend, she eventually blows up, and eventually she blew up me also. But that's kind of the lesson of the. So again, the planet, the Atmakarka planet, needs to often kind of learn the Karaka values and may not be good at them unless there's extreme dignity in the chart. So friendship for Mercury, speech, being responsible and not a child, those are lessons of Mercury Atmakarka. Jupiter Atmakarka. Jupiter must assume the role of protector of others as the guru. So, guru has to be a teacher. And for women, when women have Jupiter Atmakarka, they often get imperfect husbands, and they need to kind of deal with them, or they may have children that are really kind of problematic, and they have to kind of learn to put their children ahead of themselves. So again, the Karaka value for Jupiter is children and husbands, and particularly for women having Jupiter Atmakarka, they have to do a better job at it, and they didn't do a good job last time. Jupiter, the big thing about Jupiter Atmakarka that I always tell people is they have to become teachers. I mean, they're meant to teach, and yet everybody I talk to that has Jupiter Atmakarka, they don't teach enough, or they don't feel good enough about teaching, or they're blocked. And my wife is probably the best teacher I've ever met of anything. I mean, she is funny. She's Toastmaster of the Year. She was absolutely amazing. I have to force her to get out and teach meditation and spirituality because she has this reluctance about it, and that's part of her purpose. Jupiter Atmakarka has to teach. But when Jupiter's afflicted as the Atmakarka, it could be prone to wrong judgment or strong ego or lack of intolerance. I think, you see a lot of these fundamentalist people, Jupiter, when it's like in Sagittarius and afflicted, they become like fanatical and fundamentalist, and they have such a strong ego around that. And so a weak Jupiter Atmakarka could give persons lessons in learning tolerance and accepting others. They have to, Jupiter's the Karaka is the significator for judgment. So Jupiter Atmakarka may be too judgmental and too condescending, and they have to learn how to kind of, accept people as they are. So you see how the Atmakarka actually has the darkest qualities of the planet, particularly if it's afflicted. Not always, but most of the time. Jupiter Atmakarka needs to learn to listen, to develop faith and tolerance. They may have issues with husbands for women or children. Again, if Jupiter is well placed, these problems will still be there, but they won't be as strong. Venus Atmakarka. So Venus has to learn to control their physical passions and excessive sensory desires, or this leads to broken families or disease. So, and ultimately they have to kind of accept relationships as they are. I mean, we all want to change our partners, and Venus Atmakarka has to kind of just say, you're okay, I accept you, because, Venus Atmakarka will get into affairs if it's afflicted by Mars or Rahu, and then break up the family and develop venereal disease or something like that, because it's unable to control physical passion, and accept relationships as they are. So a Venus Atmakarka, if afflicted, like in Virgo, could be a flirt, oversexed, unable to relax and enjoy life, have fun. They have huge problems with love, marriage, and children. Again, if there's dignity, like in Pisces or Taurus or Libra, they may be a great giver of love. So I'm talking about the darker side of the Atmakarka in this talk because until recently I wasn't as clear about it, and the Atmakarka has a very dark side, and it often does come out because there's always some affliction in the chart. Saturn Atmakarka, this is the one I know well. So Saturn Atmakarka needs to learn how to not create pain or grief or sorrow for others. So in past lifetimes, they have transgressed over the freedoms and rights of others, and now they have to share the sorrow of many others in this lifetime and support them, facing the harsh. So this is, this one I kind of know well, but Saturn Atmakarka has to kind of be a healer and help other people through their suffering and their grief. And in the past, if they've caused a lot of grief for others, they now have to kind of totally be there to support people. So when they have people in their lives that are deep in suffering and coming to them for help, they have to kind of be there, and they have to kind of like not shun that responsibility. And it's interesting, as a Jyotishi now, that's what I do. I people come to me and I kind of take on their suffering on some level and help them with their suffering, and I'm totally there for them. So my Saturn Atmakarka has kind of blossomed through my profession in helping people. But there are other ways that my Saturn Atmakarka is still learning. I've had a lot of difficult relationships with Saturn is connected to employees or workers, and I've just had a lifetime of problems with people who work for me, and not learning the deep lessons of Saturn Atmakarka. If Saturn's afflicted, it can have a grudging personality, be sluggish. Again, Saturn can be slow if it's afflicted. Health problems can be a problem with Saturn Atmakarka. Learning to become a hard worker, I have no problem with that with an exalted Saturn Atmakarka. It's too hardworking. And never hurting others nor running away from sorrow. So you have to kind of be compassionate and listen there and be there for others, and just not be different from that. And I admittedly, I'm just thinking, I was just listening to a spiritual tape from my guru, and he was talking about how we actually can create negative karma for ourselves if we kind of walk away from something. And for example, if you saw somebody about to fall into a sewer hole and fall into a hole, and you didn't yell, "Stop, you're going to fall," or something like that, because you just or actually more realistically, actually, let's say you found a banana peel on the stairway that somebody had left. Now, do you complain about the janitors not having doing their job and picking it up, and just leave it and kind of joke about it, which is not accepting responsibility like a Saturn Atmakarka? Or do you pick it up and you do something about it because you don't want somebody else to fall? I mean, if you don't take responsibility with Saturn Atmakarka and pick it up, then you're creating future karma. Now, I have a problem with this too, because we talked about this in my last class. As a Jyotishi, you're not supposed to help people unless they ask for help. And I think there's two levels of that. That's absolutely very true. But I think, if you see somebody about to walk into, a manhole and you don't say anything, I think it's a problem. And I've been dealing with this recently. There's a friend of ours in my life that has mental illness, and she has this fantasy that she's going to marry this man on Facebook, and he's proposed to her, and he's and it's a mess because it's a scam, and everybody has told her to, you know, to get away, and she doesn't listen to anybody. And I didn't step in and say anything because I didn't, you know, everybody else told her. And I was just wondering, well, should I have really gone the distance, you know, because I'm powerful sometimes in convincing people, you know, to get through to her. And I just couldn't deal with it. And I don't know, you know, I don't know if that's shirking my Saturn Atmakarka responsibility. You know, deep spiritual question here. Now, Rahu Atmakarka. Now, Kan Rao feels there's only 7 Atmakarkas, and he has probably 50 years of experience working with this. Sanjay Roth's tradition says that we should use Rahu as the Atmakarka, and he uses the 8 scheme. And this is like this huge debate in Vedic astrology. For years, I've been following Sanjay Roth, and just recently, one of my mentors, Robert Koch, was saying after years he went back to 7 Atmakarkas himself. When I talk to people with Rahu Atmakarka, I often find they have the issues of Rahu Atmakarka. So I'm, you know, I try to be objective and experimental and scientific about this. And I suppose somebody has to do a study of 200 people to kind of come up with a definitive answer. So hopefully somebody will volunteer. So Rahu Atmakarka has to suffer as a result of the deception of others. It may find themselves cheated or betrayed by others. Whenever I ask anybody who has Rahu Atmakarka, it's like a major issue in their life. You know, it's like they've been betrayed and cheated and swindled, and you know they're still dealing with it. So it requires them to have a pure heart and straightforward dealing, and to kind of check people out carefully. Rahu needs to become like, I think it's Familki. There's a very famous scribe of the Ramayana who started out as a criminal and then he became a saint. So I kind of think the journey of Rahu Atmakarka is learning this lesson of becoming a saint and suffering through these issues, and ultimately kind of must live the life of a Milky, becoming this great saint even after starting his life out as a criminal. So it's a beautiful spiritual story. And again, Rahu Atmakarka has to learn about disappointment and fear. Ketu cannot be Atmakarka because it's the Karka for moksha. Rahu Atmakarka could have the dark qualities of Rahu. It could be confused, cloudy thinking, caught in cycles of cheating and being cheated. So, I mean, it's both things. I mean, if you're a cheater, you end up being cheated. You know, Rahu, you know, we see this all over TV. It's all these people that are criminals cheating other criminals and then being swindled themselves and going to jail. You know, it's that kind of manipulative, kind of, you know, crazy karma that goes on with Rahu. But, you know, eventually, you know, can you be like Bill Murray and rise above it and, you know, become a saint? I'm going to stop and take a few questions here. I think I see some questions. I'm not going to answer the question about Donald Trump at the moment. I will get to it, George, if I have time. Okay, so if 2 planets, so George does have a very important question. If 2 planets are at the same degree, which one would be the Atmakaraka? Well, most Jyotish programs, if you get a high quality Jyotish program, will have degrees in minutes, and they will even calculate seconds even. So you can always find the planet with a higher degree if you use a good program that calculates minutes also. So often there are settings on the program that allow you to put in the minutes. So you know, that wouldn't be a problem. Yeah, Shauna Grask asks, what is the significance of the Lagna Lord as Atmakarka? I mentioned that in the presentation. It means that there's coherence between the physical existence and the soul's journey. So that it's a good thing. George Thompson again was asking about Rahu Atmakarka, and I just answered that. It's a deep controversy. I've, over the last 6 years, I've gone back and forth. At the moment, I'm switching to 7 Atmakarkas. But I respect and admire Sanjay Rath so much I can't. It's hard. And from my experience, I go back and forth. So at the moment, my program is set up for 7. So how do you judge the Atmakarka? I mean, this is something that is important because you can get these little aphorisms, if Mars is the Atmakarka, then you're supposed to practice nonviolence. But, like anything in Vedic astrology, it's strands of DNA. So is the Atmakarka in a friendly sign? Is it in a good house? If that's the case, the soul's journey may be comfortable. Is it exalted? The person may be blessed by Vishnu, it said. Comfortable life. So an exalted Atmakarka can be very good. Virgodama Atmakarka, blessings of Shiva and Vishnu. As I mentioned, a Virgodama Atmakarka gives soul coherence. That means you're able to fulfill your desires. So that's what we know there. Now, what house is the Atmakarka in? That will just, even in the Rashi chart, that will tell us something about the lessons that we need to learn. So the 9th house placement of the Atmakarka may mean we have to learn about lessons around father, guru, religion. 4th house Atmakarka, property, mother. So we do look at the Atmakarka in the house that it's in because it will show us what are the lessons that we need to learn. Now, I have Atmakarka in the 12th house. So my lessons are about seva and sacrifice, which I did a lot of, and I did learn them, but lately I've given up seva because I haven't had time to do it. So maybe I'm not living my Saturn Atmakarka lessons. My 12th house is also connected to expenditures. I've had huge lessons around expenditures in my life, and I'm still going through those, and I haven't completely learned all those lessons yet. But whatever house your Atmakarka goes in tells you something about the level of suffering that you're going to have in that area. Atmakarka in the 8th can lead to poverty, loss of marriage, problems with debt. Atmakarka in the 12th leads to losses, humiliation, living abroad sometimes. Again, in Vedic culture, they don't like living abroad because you're leaving your family, and your family doesn't travel, and your family can't go out of India. So in modern times, everybody wants to leave India and get a job in Silicon Valley. So I'm not sure that's a problem. Atmakarka conjunctions. Now, the planet that the Atmakarka is conjunct, again, I'm sorry I don't have a lot of examples. In fact, even if I wanted to bring them in, my Jyotish program just crashed. So I'm in big trouble, in fact. So planetary conjunctions with the Atmakarka may override the house one is in. For those of you who know, sometimes if a planet is in close conjunction with another planet, it becomes more important than the house that it's in, and that's true for the Atmakarka. So let's say the Atmakarka is conjunct the Lord of the 5th house. There may be a lot of suffering for children, even though, let's say, the Atmakarka is in the 10th house. So you might think that the soul's lessons are about career, but because the Atmakarka is conjunct the 5th Lord, the issue and for the Atmakarka is really about children, or the 5th house, or other 5th house issues, which could be spiritual initiations, self-expression, inspiration, all those things. The Atmakarka is in the 6th or the 8th house. Now, this can bring a lot of Saturn energy. Again, 8th house is connected to longevity and Saturn and deep suffering. 6th house is also connected to more to Saturn and Mars, the routine and drudgery of everyday work. So if you have Atmakarka in the 6th or the 8th house, it's a difficult placement because you're having trouble. It's bringing in extra Saturn energy, which nobody wants. So it's said that you could fast on the 15th day of the waxing moon, which is called the Purnima Tithi, to improve health. But if you have Saturn Atmakarka in the 6th or the 8th house, it brings a lot of unfulfilled goals from past lives. And So there are all these kind of complicated things. And for those of you who know Boudica, sometimes Atmakarka can be a Boudica planet. And that means then there's really kind of deep suffering and unresolved karma. So example, like Jupiter, if Jupiter's Atmakarka, and it's Lord of the Seventh for Gemini and Virgo. So Geminis and Virgos have trouble with Jupiter and such because it's a Boudica planet, and they all have kind of quintessential relationship problems. So if Jupiter is also the Atmakarka, and it's the Lord of the Seventh for Gemini and Virgo, then there may be really difficult marriages and denied children. So the Boudica influence could amplify the Atmakarka problems. We did this already. Now, so here's an example. So the houses that the Atmakarka owns may also have suffering, and this is something that I just hadn't really thought about until recently, but it's true in my chart. The houses that the Atmakarka owns will also have deep suffering. So, and then again, if the Atmakarka is afflicted. So, and again, with Jyotish, we never want to use one thing, but don't forget the Atmakarka is so king of the chart that it can kind of take over other priorities. So my third and fourth houses, my third house was connected to younger siblings, and my fourth house connected to mother, home, and family, are ruled by Saturn, and they're connected to my Atmakarka. And I have a very deep karmic relationship with my younger brother, who actually probably killed me in a past lifetime and wanted me in this lifetime to make amends. And, for 20 years, I wouldn't let him in. So that's kind of a, deep Atmakarka lesson that's coming through the house ownership of the Atmakarka. I have a lot of fourth house issues with my mom and property. Also, they're huge Atmakarka issues that have created deep suffering in my life. So the houses that are owned, suddenly, if the Atmakarka is particularly badly afflicted, can really take a spill. Atmakarka in the Rashi chart. So, okay, we just went over this. I don't need to repeat it. So the Atmakarka in the seventh house may mean relationship is a central issue. Atmakarka in the 10th house, career is a central issue. And there's going to be a lot, unless there's dignity, there's going to be a lot of suffering wherever the Atmakarka is placed. Now, I may stop here. What I wanted to do is there's these charts that are created from the Atmakarka. So one of them is called the Karakamsha chart, and it's abbreviated K. And I hate these Sanskrit. Sometimes I call it the soul chart because I hate kind of using these complicated words that kind of immediately turn the mind off. But the Karakamsha chart puts the Atmakarka in the first house, and so whatever sign that falls in. So for example, my Atmakarka is Saturn. And I'd show you this, but my Jyotish program just totally crashed. My Atmakarka is Saturn. It's in Gemini Navamsha. So if we rotate the Navamsha chart, and so Gemini becomes the first house, then the Karakamsha Lagna is Saturn in the first house in Gemini. And it also gives me a lot of Gemini rising in my chart because it's kind of a deeper level of the soul. So, and then there's another chart where you kind of transpose the Rashi chart onto the Karakamsha Navamsha chart, and you get a chart that reveals life purpose. And I can't explain that in 5 minutes, but I may send the slides for those of you who are to read, because it's just we get Jyotish overload after a little while. This material is obviously endless, and as you know, the ocean of Jyotish is very deep. But I'm gonna pause here for questions, and I also just want to let you know, if you're interested in signing up for this class, it's going to be on Saturdays. I'm sorry, it's my Saturday or my Sunday class? It's my Saturday class starting August 10th. And it's going to be weekly. It's going to be 18 weeks. This is very deep material. I used to do like 10 and 12-week classes, and then I would run out of time and feel like I was covering things superficially. So as you saw, there's a lot of deep material in this class. I'm very excited about it. You can sign up on my website. It's often on the, you can go under basically on, there's a tab at the top that says course pages, and then there's a lot of courses, so you're going to have to scroll down and look for it. It will show up on the sidebar because it's currently on sale for $295. The sale is going through this week. So if you tell me that you want to be in the class and you want the sale price, I'll give you the sale price, even if you need to do it a little bit later. And if you need a payment plan, we could work that out on PayPal. But if you register early, you'll save some money. I only take about 20 people in my classes. I have like 21 people in my Rahu and Ketu class. And when there's too many people in the class, when you start wanting to illustrate people's lives from the charts, you just never get to everybody and people feel frustrated. So my classes have been actually filling up quite a bit. So if you'd like to get in the class, I suggest that you register. My contact information is again here. So I will post this tape on YouTube probably by Monday, if for people who've missed it, and I'll send you a link so you could watch it again. And I usually send the PowerPoint. I'll probably send you an abbreviated PowerPoint also if you want to look at the notes. I will open the mic up to everybody. So I'm unmuting everybody. So basically, if you want to ask a question now, your mic is unmuted and you can't answer it. And I may have missed some questions. John just said, what does Ketu and Rahu conjunct indicate in the D20? Now, in certain of the Vargic charts, Rahu and Ketu are just conjunct just because of the way they're calculated. Rahu and Ketu in the Vargic charts basically shows a deep past karma and central issue. So Rahu and Ketu, if they're ever conjunct in a Varga chart, and they do appear conjunct in some Varga charts, basically show a lot of past life karma that needs to be worked on. We're going to have a lesson on that in my Rahu and Ketu class. And it depends what house it is in the D20. So if it's in if it's in the 6th house or something, it's going to, that's the most difficult placement. The 6th house in most Varga charts is tricky because it's obstacles and challenges. And so, but Rahu and Ketu in the 1st in the D20 chart may mean you're not able to follow a guru, or that you want your own brand of religion. Rahu and Ketu in the 9th house in the D20 may give an orientation toward, again, rebelling against your guru. So again, all those things are kind of key. Good. Again, the mics are live for questions. This is my contact information again. You can email me specific needs and questions. And again, if you're unable to take this course live, it does get recorded and you can watch it during the week at your own leisure time. Sometimes the material for my classes are in my books, so that's good. Question?
Yeah, I had a question. You mentioned looking at the degree in the D20 to determine the Ishta Devata, and I'm wondering if that's specific to certain programs applications?
Well, okay,
software?
it's the 12th house in the Karaka Devamsha. Let me see if I can get this program up and running. You know, I don't know, it just crashed on me, which is so weird. Maybe it will. It's see, it's trying. It's trying to. Okay, it may be here. Let me see. So let's look at Frank Sinatra's Ishtadevata. You know, for some reason it's trying to reinstall the program, and I don't know. I don't know, and then it's not even getting past this tutorial thing, so I'm gonna have to reinstall the whole thing. Okay, so
Okay, another time if it's not accessible, but you're saying it's the 12th house in the
I'll
Karaka?
show. I can bring it up now.
Okay.
Okay, so I can bring it up. I had one set up to watch, and it's. I don't know if the pages got lost too. Jesus. I can bring it up quickly. I'm a master at this program. Okay. Rashi, so I could bring up, well, I can't bring up yours because the program crashed with all the data. Oh, well. Okay, there's two charts that I look on my screen, and so this is for Frank Sinatra. I'm not sure he was that spiritual person, but it's called the Karakamsha Devamsha chart, and again, I don't have his. I'll have to bring up his Rashi chart here too. So here's his Rashi chart. This is so difficult. Okay, so his Atmakarka is the sun. Or am I missing something here? No, it's Jupiter. That's what I thought. Yeah, I'm sorry. So planet with the highest number of degrees is Jupiter. It's conjunct Rahu, but Jupiter has the highest number of degrees. Now, so this is the Jupiter. If you know, Jupiter's in Gemini Navamsha because it's, you know, if you know your Navamshas, it's the last sign of Aquarius. So this is correct. So Jupiter is the Atmakarka. So this is the chart of his talents. And there's a whole way of reading this now. So you look at the 12th house from in the Karakamsha Navamsha chart, and it's Mars. So Hanuman, the planet in the 12th house, is the Ishtadevata in the Karakamsha Devamsha chart. So Hanuman was his Ishtadevata, and if he was a spiritual person, he could be listening to Hanuman Chalisa or doing devotional activities to Hanuman, and that's how you figure that out. But you also have to look at the 5th house in the Rashi chart, which is connected to Rahu. Let's see, it's the Rahu or Saturn. So I just had a lesson of this in my Varga class. When I'm determining the best planet to worship for maximum devotion towards moksha, there's about 5 or 6 things I look at now, and I can't. And again, I'm using Frank Sinatra's chart, who's not even a spiritual person. So let's see if I can find somebody who's actually. I'll show you mine. I'm a spiritual person. Okay, so my Atmakarka is Saturn. It's 27 degrees. It's in Gemini Devamsha. It's with Rahu and Venus, so it's pretty complicated. We'll have to talk about that. But 12th from the Atmakarka is Jupiter. So Jupiter or the sun in the 12th house in this chart would indicate a devotion toward Shiva. Now, it also happens that the fifth house has the planet in the fifth house, which is connected to mantras and spiritual worship, is the sun also. So here's Shiva again. And the two other ways that I look at my chart, I keep coming up with Shiva. So there's another chart called the D5. So the planet owning the fifth house in the D5 chart will also reveal the planet of worship. And again, it's Leo, so it's the sun. So I have total coherence about, who my Ishtadevata is, and it's Shiva. And I've always been drawn to Shiva, but it's absolutely there in all three charts. Does that help?
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And sometimes it can get complicated. Sometimes there's no planet in the house. Then you have to look at the owner of the house, and then you have to see who has the strongest aspect to that house. So it's not always a piece of cake, but in my chart, it's easy. Let's look at other questions. Again, you're unmuted if you have any other questions. If not, okay. Okay. Okay, so it's actually 5 o'clock Central Time. For those of you who are on the West Coast, there's still some of your afternoon to enjoy. I've enjoyed working with you today, and I hope you learned something. Please send me any feedback. I'm always trying to get these things correct. If you're interested in the class, or visit my website, send me an email, and I'd be happy to work with you in whatever way you'd like to work with. So looking forward to this class starting on August 10th, and it is possible to take the course in 2 segments. So the first segment is going to be more on Atmakarka and these kind of soul charts, and maybe the D20 chart. And the second half is going to be on some of the more advanced things on the Astro Yoga, but it's possible to divide it into 2 if you just want to take an 8-week class. Okay, guys. So I'll stay online if anybody wants to ask a personal question, not in front of the group, but I will be off in a few minutes or so. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you in my future classes. You can also see tapes like this on my YouTube channel at Financial Astrology by Barry Rosen.
I have a question. Did I hear you mention in the class you're going to use the students' charts?
Yeah. If you in class, what I do, if you volunteer your chart data, you don't have to. Some people don't want to have their chart data in class. If you'd like me to talk about your chart in class and to use examples from the points that I make, I do that in every class. It's a good way of making the material come home, because if you see the principle in your chart, you suddenly recognize it. I mean, if you see it in a famous person's chart, like we did Frank Sinatra, I mean, I'm not sure it meant anything, But if we're looking at the Ishtadevata on my chart, it makes sense. So I do use people's charts to illustrate main points if they volunteer them. You don't have to.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Final Jeopardy answer is, okay, so some of you I'll see in my Secret of the Houses class tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And the rest of you, I hope to see you someplace on YouTube or Facebook, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.